Hey friends, I am Tammy Kay. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am working on a super large project. You can get a glimpse of what we're working on today, these lovely little loose snapdragons. And I'm actually working on this 20 by 30 inch piece for my new office studio. So we're just gonna go ahead and paint right on it today. This is not on any special paper. This is on just cheap student pulp paper. We're using a cheap palette that has lovely fluorescent paints and things I love. We're just gonna get into it. So today, as I'm starting to add these really light, soft blooms, and then I'm poking in a little bit of color on top of it, I wanna talk to you guys about my tips for composition. And the first thing is to talk about asymmetry. So you know how when you're trying to create something, your brain starts to tell you to make things matchy-matchy, to kind of make sure that if you're putting something on the left, you're putting it on the right. And it's this need to make sure that there is balance in that way. But there are other ways to do balance in your painting, which we're going to talk about and I'm going to show you here. But to get back to this, I'm doing these really small, loose brush strokes. I'm changing up the colors and I'm also changing up the value of the colors as well. So I want these blooms to be really loose and I'm not adding in my stem yet. Here's why. When I put a stem, then all those blooms have to kind of go where that stem is or it's going to look weird. But what I like to do is just kind of intuitively place the little petals, the little flowers, and then I'll connect the stem based on where I put those blooms. So it might be counterintuitive or it might feel more complicated. To me, it seems to work well and it creates a looser stem of flowers like in this case. So I've got these little brush strokes and I'm using basically that shape of that brush, pressing down either lightly for a tiny little bud at the top or a lot more pressure is used to create a larger, thicker mark. So I want this to be very full. I'm calling these snapdragons, but maybe they could be delphinium. Maybe they could be kind of like larkspur. And, certainly you're not going to find all these colors on a stem of flowers like this, but that's what's the beauty of art, where we can do what we want and we can enjoy it and just, be lighthearted about it. So now I'm going for my green because I want to start making this really look like a stem of flowers. This is, one of those first parts of my composition. It may be a focal piece, it may not be, depending on what I put in afterwards. Getting in that really thin stem, just kind of flicking the brush, connecting each little grouping or just flower to the stem and all the way up to the top as well. And if you'd like, you can add in a few more brush strokes just for some green, some little leaves and buds that aren't open yet as well. So then I go back in and I start to just add in more loose petals based on where I think they should go, based on if it's looking a little thin and needing some more kind of fluffing up. So take a look at your painting so far. I hope you can find at least one thing that you like. We're gonna go for another bloom here, and keep in mind that part of creating that really nice balanced composition is creating a contrast between the flowers and the values and that kind of thing. So I went with a deeper orangey red here, and then I'm adding some really light petals in between, and I'm just going to make it look a little bit different. So when you're thinking about that balance and that contrast, you want to think about those values. And so that's something to talk about a lot. We've got really light pink on here, and then we've got that dark red. And those values, that means the lightness and the darkness of a color, they're just going to contrast each other and stand out next to each other. So we're going with that light pink again at the top. Now I can already tell as I'm painting this in that we're gonna have two stalks of flowers that look very similar next to each other. And so if you're in a situation like this, the question might be like, okay, what do I do? They look very similar. They are not balanced in any way. They're doing the matchy-matchy. There's symmetry. Asymmetry was thrown out the window. So I will help you find out in the next few blooms like how to balance this out in a way that makes sense. But right now, stick with what you've got and add those stems in as well. And you don't have to change everything up or throw something away just because it's not turning out exactly the way you want it. The whole point is to keep going, push forward, because you might find that something you create actually end up being something you like more than your original idea. Believe me, this happens to me all the time. So I just encourage you to keep going, keep moving, and you might surprise yourself. So in my compositions, you might notice I like to add things in as I go. I might have a plan and then I change up the plan. Like for example, I added in a few more petals to that first bloom just because I thought it needed it. So I'm looking at this, I'm adding a little bit of color wet on wet because it helps to spread. If that bottom layer is wet, it's going to take that lovely new layer of paint and it's going to create some really nice edges, and they're going to be soft and billowy and blend together. So this round here, I decided to do a bloom that is leaning off to the right. It's a little bit shorter because it is leaning than the other two. And I also decided just to go with a light color first and then pop in the bright color afterwards. So you can see me kind of marking where I want things to be and then, adding it a little differently and just kind of going with the flow with it. So I've got another one here on the left side, also bending over. It's shorter than the other three. And so now we're starting to try to balance things out in a way that is going to be appealing because we have blooms that are different heights, and that's really important to do. So as I'm looking for this, I'm wanting to add another one here at the top that's a little bit higher than the rest. It is arced a little bit as well, and I did that light color, then adding in that darker color afterwards. Friends, if you're liking this video, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. And I want to remind you too that I teach watercolor on Skillshare, but I have a membership on Patreon, and it's as low as $3 a month where you can get bonus content, all the fun stuff. So check out the Skillshare classes as well as Patreon, as well as all the other things listed in the description of this video. So I do want to say briefly that a balanced composition often entails an odd number of blooms, but here I'm breaking that little rule because I wanted to add a sixth bloom, but make it shorter off to the side. I wanted to fill that white space, and I just wanted to have the different heights there. I think this works in this case. You don't have to follow the rules exactly how you hear them. You just have to have fun. Happy painting, you guys, and happy mental health.